Tonight we will embark on a gentle journey, not to a destination, but into presence. We will explore the timeless wisdom of the Buddha, teachings that have served as a refuge for restless minds for over 2,500 years. Welcome to Sleep Zen Meditations, a sanctuary where ancient wisdom meets the stillness of night. Here, there is nothing you need to do, nothing to fix, and no one you need to become. You are already complete, already whole, exactly as you are in this moment. If this path calls to you, if these teachings bring you peace, I gently invite you to subscribe to this channel. By doing so, you join a community of seekers who gather here each night to rest in the profound simplicity of the Buddha's wisdom. But there is no pressure, no obligation. Simply allow these words to wash over you like warm water, like gentle rain on willing soil. Tonight, we explore a question that may hold the key to profound peace. What if letting go is the answer? Not letting go as giving up, not letting go as indifference or apathy, but letting go as the Buddha taught it, as the path to freedom from suffering, as the doorway to deep peace, as the way to live fully while holding nothing so tightly that it binds us. For thousands of years, practitioners have discovered that most of our suffering comes not from the challenges life brings, but from our resistance to those challenges, from our clinging to what we want to keep, from our pushing away what we don't want to face, from our desperate attempts to control the uncontrollable flow of existence. And in the moment we learn to let go, truly let go, everything changes. This is not a teaching about becoming passive or disconnected. It is about discovering a different way of engaging with life, a way that allows us to care deeply without being destroyed by loss, to love fully without suffocating what we love, to strive for excellence without being crushed by failure, to live with open hands instead of clenched fists. These teachings are invitations, not rules. They are experiments to try in the laboratory of your own experience. They are ancient maps pointing toward a territory you must explore yourself. Take what resonates, question what doesn't. Trust your own direct experience above all else. So settle now into whatever position brings you comfort. Let your body sink into the surface beneath you. Feel the gentle pull of gravity, inviting you down, 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 into deep rest. There is nothing more for you to do tonight, nothing to accomplish, no one to impress, no goal to reach, just breathe. Let us begin this journey together. Breathe in slowly through your nose, filling your belly with air. Hold for a moment at the top and release through your mouth with a soft sigh. Again, breathing in this present moment, breathing out all effort, breathing in this invitation to rest, breathing out all resistance. Good. The first story we will explore tonight takes us to the heart of what it means to let go. Not of things we don't care about, but of the very things we hold most precious. For it is in these moments that we discover what letting go truly means. In a small fishing village where the sea met the shore in an endless dance of waves and sand, there lived a fisherman named Kaido, whose hands were weathered by salt and rope, whose face was lined by decades of sun and wind. He had been a fisherman his entire life, as his father had been, and his father's father before him, stretching back through generations to a time no one could remember. Kaido owned a boat that he had built himself 20 years ago, a beautiful vessel of dark wood with sails that caught the wind like wings. He had shaped every plank with his own hands, sealed every joint, carved the name into the bow, Megumi, after his wife who had passed away the year the boat was completed. The boat was not just a tool for catching fish. It was a living connection to his beloved, a testament to his skill, a companion through countless journeys across the water. Each morning before dawn, Kaito would walk down to the harbor where his boat waited. Tied to the dock with thick ropes he replaced every season. He would run his hands along the hull, checking for any damage, any sign of wear. He would adjust the sails with practiced precision, arrange his nets with meticulous care. Everything had its place, its proper order, its ritual significance. The other fishermen respected Kaito not just for his skill at finding fish, but for the love he showed his boat, while others treated their vessels as mere tools, replacing them when they wore out. Kaito tended to Megumi with a devotion that bordered on worship. He repaired every scratch, repainted every season, refused to let any imperfection mar her beauty. But this devotion had become something else over the years. It had become a kind of anxious vigilance, a constant worry, a fear that lived in Kaito's chest like a stone. What if the boat was damaged in a storm? What if rot set in despite his careful maintenance? What if she was destroyed, and with her, his last tangible connection to his wife? He couldn't sleep on stormy nights, lying awake listening to the wind, imagining the boat straining at her moorings, imagining waves battering her hull. He would rise in the darkness and rush down to the harbor just to check, to reassure himself that she was still there, still whole, still his. The other fishermen noticed. "Kaito," they would say, "you will drive yourself mad with this worry. The boat is strong. You built her well. Let her be." But Kaito couldn't let go of the vigilance. The thought of losing Megumi was unbearable. So he held on tighter, worried more, slept less. One autumn, a great typhoon approached the coast. The weather watchers warned that it would be the worst storm in 50 years. All the fishermen pulled their boats from the water, dragging them up onto the beach, securing them with ropes and anchors, doing everything possible to protect their vessels from the coming fury. Kaito worked harder than anyone. He surrounded Megumi with sandbags. He tied her down with twice as many ropes as the other boats. He built a windbreak from driftwood and canvas. He spent 3 days preparing, checking every knot, adjusting every support, unable to rest, driven by the terror of loss. The night before the typhoon was to arrive, Kaito stood in the harbor looking at his boat, and he felt something break inside him. Not his spirit, but something else. A recognition. He was exhausted. Not just physically, but exhausted in his soul. The effort of holding on so tightly, of trying to protect against every possible harm, of refusing to accept that loss was possible. It had drained him of all joy, all peace, all ability to simply be present with life as it unfolded. Unable to bear the weight any longer, Kaito walked through the dark village to a small temple that sat on a hill overlooking the sea. He had not been to the temple in years, not since Megumi's funeral. But tonight, something drew him there. The temple's door was open despite the late hour. Inside, a single candle burned before a statue of the Buddha, and sitting in meditation before the statue was an old monk named Ryokan, whose reputation for wisdom had spread throughout the region, though he never left this small temple, never sought students, never claimed to teach anything at all. Kaito stood in the doorway, unsure whether to enter, unsure what he was even seeking. Ryokan opened his eyes and looked at him with a gaze that seemed to see everything and judge nothing. "Come," the monk said simply. "Sit." Kaito sat on the wooden floor, his fisherman's body uncomfortable in the meditation posture. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, as if a dam had broken, words poured out of Kaito. About Megumi, both the woman and the boat. About his fear of loss. About the typhoon coming. About his desperate attempts to protect what he loved. About the exhaustion of holding on so tightly. Ryokan listened without interrupting, his face reflecting the candlelight, his presence somehow both completely attentive and completely at ease. When Kaito finally fell silent, the monk was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke. "Tell me," Ryokan said, his voice like rustling leaves. "When your wife was alive, did you hold her?" "Of course," Kaito said, "every day." "And when you held her, did you squeeze as tightly as you could? Did you grip her so hard that she couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't be free?" Kaito looked confused. "No, that would hurt her. I held her gently. I wanted her to feel safe, not trapped." "Ah," Ryokan said, nodding. "So, you understood, with your wife, that love means holding gently, not gripping desperately. That true care allows for freedom, not control." "Yes," Kaito said, "but the boat is different. The boat can't." "The boat can't what?" Ryokan interrupted gently. "Can't leave you? Can't choose to go? But the typhoon doesn't ask your permission. The sea doesn't care how tightly you hold on. The storm will do what storms do, and your desperate gripping won't change that. It only makes you suffer more." Kaito felt tears rising. "But if I let go, if I stop trying to protect her, then I'm just giving up. I'm letting her be destroyed without even fighting." "Is there a difference," Ryokan asked, "between doing everything skillfully possible to protect what you care for and being destroyed by the anxiety of trying to control what you cannot control?" Kaito paused. He had done everything possible. The boat was secured as well as any boat could be. Every practical measure had been taken. What he couldn't control was the storm itself. What he couldn't guarantee was the outcome. And it was this lack of guarantee, this inability to ensure safety, that was tormenting him. "I'm afraid," Kaito admitted. "I'm afraid of losing her, of losing that connection to my wife, of being alone." Ryokan's face softened with deep compassion. "Your wife is not in the boat," he said gently. "She never was. The love you shared, the memories you hold, the way she changed you and lives on in how you move through the world, none of that resides in wood and sail. You could burn the boat tomorrow and that love would still be real, still be whole, still be yours." "But the boat is all I have left of her," Kaito protested. "No," Ryokan said. "The boat is something you made in grief, seeking to hold on to what had already passed. It is a beautiful thing. It has served you well. But it has also become a prison. You are trying to keep your wife alive by keeping the boat perfect. But she is already alive. In your heart, in your memories, in the very fact that you loved her and were transformed by that love. The boat cannot add to this, and losing the boat cannot diminish this." Kaito sat with these words, feeling them work their way into his understanding. "So what do I do?" he asked. "How do I stop being afraid?" "You don't stop being afraid," Ryokan said. "Fear is natural when we love things that can be lost. But you can stop letting fear run your life. You can acknowledge the fear, feel it fully, and then release it. Like a wave that rises and falls, you can do what can be done, and then let go of the outcome. You can love the boat without making your peace depend on keeping it forever. How? Kaito asked. How do I just let go? Ryokan stood slowly and walked to the temple's open door, gesturing for Kaito to join him. They stood together looking out at the dark sea, at the stars beginning to disappear behind approaching clouds. Do you see the waves? Ryokan asked. Yes. Each wave rises from the ocean, exists for a moment, and returns to the ocean. While it exists, it is completely a wave, distinct, individual, real. But it never tries to not return to the ocean. It never clings to its waveness. It rises and falls naturally, without resistance, without fear. This is the way of all things. He paused. Your boat, like your wife, like your own body, like everything in this world of form, is a wave. It arose. It exists beautifully for a time, and it will return. This is not tragedy. This is the nature of existence. When you fight against this, when you try to make the wave permanent, you suffer. When you accept this, when you appreciate the wave while it's here, without demanding it last forever, you find peace. But how do I accept it? Kaito asked. How do I just be okay with losing what I love? You start by recognizing that you've already lost what you love, Ryokan said, and his voice was infinitely gentle. Your wife is gone. This is already true. The boat will one day be gone. This is already certain. You are trying to prevent what has already happened or what will inevitably happen. And this is the source of your suffering, the resistance to reality, the demand that life be different than it is. He turned to face Kaito. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you stop trying to control the uncontrollable. You've done everything you can to protect your boat. Now comes the practice of accepting that the outcome is not in your hands. The typhoon will do what it does. The boat will survive, or it won't. And either way, you will still be you. You will still carry your wife's love in your heart. You will still be capable of building another boat if you choose, or of finding a different path if that's what life brings. What if I can't? Kaito asked. What if I'm too old, too tired, too broken by loss? Those are thoughts, Ryokan said. Stories about a future that hasn't arrived. Right now, in this moment, are you old and tired and broken? Kaito checked his experience. Right now, standing in this doorway, his body was strong, his breath was flowing, his heart was beating. He was alive, present, whole in this moment. No, he said. Right now I'm okay. Yes, Ryokan said. Right now you're okay. And right now is the only time that actually exists. The past is memory. The future is imagination. This moment, right now, is reality. And in this moment, you have everything you need. In this moment, you can let go of your desperate grip on what might happen and simply be here with what is. They stood in silence as the wind began to pick up, as the first drops of rain started to fall. Kaito felt something shifting in his chest. Not a sudden transformation, but a subtle loosening, a small space opening up between him and his fear. Come with me, Ryokan said. Let's go to your boat. They walked through the rain to the harbor, and Kaito led the monk to where Megumi sat, among all his careful preparations. Ryokan walked around the boat slowly, running his hand along the hull, examining the ropes and supports. You've done well, he said. This is skillful care. This is love in action. Now comes the next part. What part? Kaito asked. The part where you say goodbye, Ryokan said. Kaito felt panic rising. You think she'll be destroyed? I don't know. Ryokan said honestly. Neither do you. Neither does anyone. But goodbye doesn't mean forever. It means releasing your grip. It means acknowledging that this boat, like all things, is temporary. It means loving her fully in this moment without demanding she last forever. Kaito looked at his boat, at the vessel that had carried him across countless miles of ocean, that had provided his livelihood, that had been his companion and his connection to his wife. And slowly, he walked forward and placed his hand on the hull. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "Thank you for every journey, for every fish caught, for carrying me safely, for being beautiful, for helping me remember Megumi." He paused, tears mixing with rain on his face. "And if this is our last night together, thank you for that too. Thank you for all of it." He stood there, his hand on the boat, feeling the wood beneath his palm, feeling the rain on his face, feeling the strange mixture of grief and relief that was flowing through him. And then, with a conscious intention, he released his hand from the hull. He stepped back. He let go, not of caring, not of love, but of the desperate need to control the outcome, of the crushing anxiety of trying to guarantee the future, of the exhausting effort of holding so tightly that his hands had become cramped and his heart had become rigid. Ryokan placed a hand on Kaito's shoulder. "This is the practice," he said. "Doing what can be done with love and skill, and then releasing the outcome. Appreciating what is here while it's here, and letting go when it's time to let go. This is how we live without being destroyed by the inevitable losses that are woven into existence." They walked back to the temple together, and Kaito sat with Ryokan through the night as the typhoon arrived in its full fury. The wind screamed, the rain lashed, the world outside became a chaos of sound and motion, and inside the temple, Kaito sat breathing, practicing letting go with each exhale, practicing acceptance with each inhale. When dawn came and the storm had passed, Kaito walked alone to the harbor. Many boats had been damaged. Some had been destroyed completely, reduced to scattered planks and torn sails. He walked among the wreckage with his heart in his throat, preparing himself for what he might find. And then he saw her, Megumi, still there, damaged. One of her masts had snapped, her paint was stripped in places, several planks were cracked, but still there, still whole enough to repair, still his. But something had changed. The relief Kaito felt was real, but it wasn't desperate. It wasn't the frantic joy of someone who had narrowly avoided losing their identity. It was the quiet appreciation of someone who had already let go and was now given an unexpected gift. He would repair her. He would care for her. But he would hold her differently now, gently, gratefully, without the crushing weight of needing her to last forever. He had learned that love doesn't require permanence, that care doesn't require control, that letting go doesn't mean caring less. It means caring more skillfully, more freely, more truly. Years later, when Megumi finally did reach the end of her life, when the wood became too rotten to repair and the time came to let her rest, Kaito was able to say goodbye without being destroyed. He held a small ceremony thanking her for her service, releasing her to the sea in the traditional way. And the grief he felt was clean, pure, uncontaminated by resistance or regret. He built another boat, a different boat, and he loved her too, but differently, with open hands, with gratitude for each day, with acceptance that this too would pass. And in that acceptance, he found a peace that had eluded him all his life, the peace of living fully, while holding nothing so tightly that it binds. This story reveals one of Buddhism's most profound and practical teachings: the art of letting go. The Buddha taught that attachment, tanha in Pali, often translated as craving or clinging, is the root cause of suffering. This doesn't mean that love is suffering or that caring about things causes pain. It means that when we cling desperately to things, when we demand that they remain unchanged, when we make our fundamental well-being dependent on keeping them exactly as they are, we create suffering for ourselves. Kaito's journey illustrates the difference between love and attachment. He loved his wife deeply, truly, completely. This love was beautiful and wholesome. But after her death, that love transformed into attachment to the boat that bore her name. He began to grip the boat desperately, to make it a substitute for the person he'd lost, to believe that keeping the boat perfect could somehow keep his wife alive. This is what attachment does. It transforms healthy care into desperate control. It changes appreciation into anxiety. It makes us prisoners of our own need for things to remain unchanged. And because everything in existence is characterized by impermanence, anicca, as the Buddha called it, this attachment inevitably leads to suffering. But letting go, as the Buddha taught it, is not the same as giving up or not caring. Kaito didn't stop caring for his boat. He didn't neglect it or abandon it. He did everything skillful and practical to protect it from the typhoon. What he let go of was not the caring, but the desperate clinging. Not the love, but the attachment. Not the connection, but the need to control the uncontrollable. This distinction is crucial. In modern Western culture, we often confuse detachment with not caring. We think that to let go means to become cold, distant, uninvolved. But the Buddhist teaching of non-attachment is something quite different. It's about learning to love and care without grasping, to engage fully with life without demanding that life conform to our wishes, to hold things gently rather than with clenched fists. Think about how we hold a butterfly. If we grip it tightly, trying to keep it from flying away, we crush it. But if we hold our hand open, if we allow it to rest there freely, knowing it may leave at any moment, we can appreciate its beauty without destroying it. This is non-attachment. This is the art of holding gently. Ryokan's teaching to Kaito used the metaphor of waves, the classic Buddhist image for understanding impermanence and letting go. Each wave rises from the ocean, exists for a moment with its own distinct form and character, and then returns to the ocean. While it exists, it is completely and beautifully a wave. But it never tries to remain a wave forever. It doesn't resist its return to the ocean. It flows naturally through its cycle of arising and passing. We are like waves. Everything we love is like waves. Our relationships, our possessions, our bodies, our circumstances, all of it arises, exists for a time, and passes away. This is not a flaw in the design of existence. This is simply how things are. And when we fight against this, when we try to make waves permanent, we suffer. When we accept this, when we appreciate the wave while it's here without demanding it last forever, we find peace. This doesn't mean we become passive or that we don't work to maintain and protect what we value. Kaito prepared his boat skillfully for the typhoon. He did everything practical and wise to protect what he cared about. But then he let go of the outcome. He accepted that despite his best efforts, the result was not in his control. And in that acceptance, he found freedom from the crushing anxiety of trying to guarantee the future. This is one of the most liberating insights of Buddhist practice. We can do our very best, bring all our skill and care to what we do, and then release our attachment to the outcome. We can act without being imprisoned by the results of our action. We can care without being destroyed by the possibility of loss. In your own life, where are you? Holding too tightly? What are you gripping so desperately that your hands have become cramped and your heart has become anxious? Is it a relationship you're afraid of losing? A job you're terrified of failing at? A version of yourself you're desperately trying to maintain? A vision of how your life should be that reality keeps refusing to match? Whatever it is, the teaching of letting go invites you to examine the difference between healthy care and desperate attachment, to notice where care has transformed into control, where love has become suffocating, where engagement has become imprisonment, and then, gently, to practice loosening your grip. Not all at once. That might feel too frightening, too much like abandonment. But gradually, experimentally, seeing what it feels like to hold a bit more lightly, to do your best and then release the outcome, to love fully while accepting that everything changes, to appreciate what's here now without demanding it last forever. This practice of letting go is not a one-time event, but a continuous process. We let go, and then we notice we're gripping again, and we let go again. We release, and then we catch ourselves trying to control, and we release again. Over and over, for the rest of our lives, we practice this dance of engaging and letting go, of caring and releasing, of loving without clinging, and slowly, gradually, we discover that letting go doesn't diminish our experience of life. It enriches it. We become more present because we're not constantly worried about the future. We appreciate things more deeply because we recognize their temporary nature. We love more freely because we're not suffocating what we love with our need for it to remain unchanged. Kaito discovered that his wife had never resided in the boat. The love they shared, the way she had changed him, the memories they created together, all of this lived in his heart, in his being, in the very fabric of who he had become. The boat was beautiful and meaningful, but it was not the container of his love. And when he realized this, he was free to appreciate the boat without needing it to be what it could never be, a permanent anchor against the flow of change. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, practice letting go. Let go of the day that is past. Release your grip on your plans for tomorrow. Allow yourself to simply be here, in this moment, held by awareness, supported by this breath, complete just as you are. Feel what it's like to release your hands, to open your fists, to let your whole body soften into acceptance of what is. You don't have to figure anything out right now. You don't have to fix anything or control anything or guarantee anything. You can simply be, simply breathe, simply rest in the natural flow of existence. This is the practice. This is the path. Not to caring less, but to holding more gently. Not to loving less, but to loving more freely. Not to engaging less, but to engaging without the crushing burden of trying to control the uncontrollable. Let go, let go, let go. And in that letting go, find the peace that is always available when we stop resisting reality and simply allow ourselves to flow with the great river of existence that carries us all. Breathe slowly now. Feel the rise and fall of your chest. Feel the natural rhythm of breathing in and breathing out. Feel how the breath comes without effort, stays for a moment, and then releases without resistance. Let your breath teach you about letting go. Each exhale is a practice in release. Each inhale is a practice in receiving. Breathe and let go. Breathe and let go. Rest in this. Rest in the peace that comes from releasing your grip on what you cannot control. Rest in the freedom that comes from loving without clinging. Rest in the deep acceptance that allows you to engage fully with life while remaining fundamentally at peace. Let us pause here for a moment. Feel the gentle rhythm of your own breath, a quiet anchor in the flow of time. Allow your body to soften, releasing any tension you might be holding in your shoulders, your jaw, your hands, your belly. Let gravity do its work, pulling you down into deep rest, down into acceptance, down into the peace that is always here beneath the surface turbulence of life. You are here. You are present. You are breathing. And in this moment, everything is actually okay. Not perfect, not permanent, but okay. Right here, right now, you have everything you need to simply be, to simply rest, to simply let go. If these teachings resonate with you, if they bring you comfort or insight or peace, I invite you to subscribe to Sleep Zen Meditations. Let this become a nightly sanctuary where you return to rest in ancient wisdom. But there is no pressure. Simply receive what is offered and let it settle where it may. Breathe deeply now. Feel the peace that comes when you stop fighting and simply allow. Let yourself be carried by the great current of existence, trusting that you can meet whatever comes, that you can let go when it's time, that you are held by something larger than your small plans and fears. Rest. Simply rest. We will continue our journey in a moment, but for now, just rest in this letting go. We turn now to another dimension of letting go, the release of the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and who we should be. For often, what binds us most tightly is not external circumstances, but our own rigid ideas about identity. In a city renowned for its scholars and libraries, where knowledge was valued above all else and intellectual achievement determined social standing, there lived a university professor named Dr. Haruki, who had devoted 40 years to the study of ancient philosophy. His office was stacked floor to ceiling with books in a dozen languages. His published works filled 3 shelves. His reputation as a brilliant thinker had spread throughout the academic world. Haruki had built his entire identity on being intelligent, on being the one who understood complex ideas, on being respected for his mental acuity. From childhood, he had been praised for his quick mind, his ability to grasp difficult concepts, his capacity to remember and recite vast amounts of information. School had been easy. University had been a triumph. His career had been a steady ascent of achievement and recognition. But now, at 65, something was changing. He would be in the middle of a lecture and lose his train of thought. He would read a passage in a book and realize he had read the same passage 3 times without retaining it. He would meet a colleague he'd known for years and struggle to remember their name. His mind, the instrument he had relied on for his entire life, the foundation of his identity and worth, was beginning to fail. At first, he dismissed it as normal aging, as fatigue, as stress. But the incidents became more frequent, more troubling. He began to fear he was developing dementia, that his mind was deteriorating, that the very thing that made him him was slipping away. The fear became consuming. He started testing himself constantly, trying to remember lists of words, trying to solve mental puzzles, frantically reading and rereading material to prove to himself that he could still understand it. He avoided social situations where his mental slips might be noticed. He turned down invitations to speak at conferences, terrified that he would forget something crucial mid-sentence. His wife, Emiko, noticed the change. Not just the memory issues, but the anxiety that surrounded them. "Haruki," she would say gently, "you're exhausting yourself. This constant testing, this fear, it's making everything worse. Maybe you should see someone. Maybe you should talk to a doctor." But Haruki couldn't, because seeing a doctor meant the possibility of a diagnosis, and a diagnosis meant confirmation that he was losing what made him valuable, what made him worthy, what made him himself. So he continued in his private terror, holding desperately to his identity as an intelligent person, feeling it slip through his fingers like water. One evening, unable to bear the isolation any longer, Haruki accepted an invitation to a small dinner party at the home of a colleague. He promised himself he would be careful, that he would navigate the conversation skillfully, that he would hide any mental lapses. At the dinner, among the guests was an elderly woman named Mrs. Tanaka, who was introduced as the grandmother of one of the young professors. She was 87, dressed simply, with eyes that sparkled with what looked like mischief. While the other guests engaged in the usual academic conversations, discussing theories, debating interpretations, displaying their knowledge, Mrs. Tanaka sat quietly, eating her meal, listening with what seemed like gentle amusement. At one point, the conversation turned to the nature of wisdom, and the guests began competing to show off their knowledge of various philosophical traditions. Haruki, despite his fear, found himself unable to resist joining in. He began to explain a complex argument from a medieval Islamic philosopher, demonstrating his command of the material. Midway through his explanation, his mind went blank. He stood there, the sentence unfinished, the conclusion forgotten, feeling the familiar panic rising. Everyone was looking at him, waiting. His face flushed, his hands trembled. And then, Mrs. Tanaka spoke for the first time that evening. "I don't understand all these complicated ideas," she said, her voice clear and gentle. "But I do know one thing. The tea is delicious. Did you notice? Really taste it?" The guests looked at her, some with barely concealed condescension. Of course they had tasted the tea. They were drinking it, weren't they? But Mrs. Tanaka smiled and picked up her cup, holding it in both hands, closing her eyes, breathing in the steam, taking a small sip and letting it rest in her mouth before swallowing. "Ah," she said, opening her eyes. "Green tea from the mountain region, picked early in the season, prepared with water at just the right temperature. Can you taste the sweetness underneath the slight bitterness? Can you feel the warmth spreading through your body? This tea will never exist again. This moment of drinking it will never come again. Isn't that worth noticing?" There was an awkward silence. Then the conversation resumed, the academics returning to their display of knowledge, dismissing the old woman's simplicity as charming but irrelevant. But Haruki couldn't let it go. After dinner, he found Mrs. Tanaka sitting alone in the garden, and he sat beside her. "Thank you," he said, "for earlier, when I forgot what I was saying." Mrs. Tanaka looked at him with those sparkling eyes. "You didn't forget what you were saying. You remembered something more important, that you are afraid." Haruki was startled by her directness. Yes, I'm afraid of losing my mind, of becoming less than I am. Less than you are? Mrs. Tanaka repeated thoughtfully. What are you exactly? Haruki opened his mouth to answer, a scholar, a philosopher, an intelligent person, but the words felt hollow. I don't know, he admitted. Good, she said. Not knowing is the beginning of wisdom. Knowing too much is the end of it. But I've spent my whole life accumulating knowledge, Haruki protested. If that's not wisdom, then what is? Mrs. Tanaka gestured to the garden around them. Can you name all these plants? She asked. Some of them, Haruki said. The common ones. I can't name any of them, Mrs. Tanaka said, but I know them all. I know which ones bloom in spring and which wait for summer. I know which ones the butterflies love. I know which ones smell sweetest in the rain. I don't know their names, but I know them. She paused. When you were explaining that philosopher earlier, before you forgot, were you really there? Were you present with the people listening? Or were you performing your intelligence, trying to prove your worth? Haruki felt the truth of this like a physical blow. He had been performing. He had been using his knowledge as a shield, as evidence of his value, as proof that he was still worthy of respect. What happens? Mrs. Tanaka asked gently. If you let go of needing to be the intelligent one, if you let go of this identity you've built your whole life on, who would you be then? I don't know, Haruki said, and he felt tears rising. I've been the smart one since I was 5 years old. It's all I know how to be. Then maybe it's time to learn who you are when you're not performing intelligence, Mrs. Tanaka said. Maybe it's time to discover what remains when the constructed identity falls away. Over the following weeks, Haruki couldn't stop thinking about this conversation. He began to notice how much effort he put into maintaining his identity as an intelligent person, how he structured every interaction around demonstrating his knowledge, how he related to the world primarily through analyzing and understanding, rather than through direct experience. He remembered the tea at the dinner party. He had been drinking it, yes, but he hadn't tasted it. He had been so busy thinking about philosophical theories that he had missed the actual experience of drinking tea with other people on that particular evening. Slowly, hesitantly, he began experimenting with letting go of his performance. In his lectures, he started saying, I don't know, when he didn't know something, instead of bluffing his way through. He started asking students what they thought, rather than always telling them what to think. He started admitting when he forgot something, rather than pretending it hadn't happened. At first, it was terrifying. Each admission of not knowing felt like a small death. But gradually, something unexpected happened. His students seemed more engaged, more willing to think for themselves. His colleagues seemed to relax around him, to share their own uncertainties. And most surprisingly, Haruki himself began to feel lighter, freer, less burdened by the constant need to maintain his image. He started practicing what Mrs. Tanaka had demonstrated, being present with direct experience rather than always analyzing it, drinking tea and actually tasting it, walking in the park and feeling the wind rather than thinking about the physics of air movement, talking with his wife and really listening rather than formulating his next intelligent response. And in these moments of simple presence, he discovered something profound. He still existed. without performing intelligence, without proving his worth through knowledge, without maintaining the identity he had constructed over 40 years, he still existed. And this existence felt more real, more alive, more connected than anything he had experienced in his decades of intellectual achievement. When he finally did see a doctor about his memory issues, the diagnosis was not dementia, but normal age-related cognitive change, exacerbated by stress and anxiety. The doctor recommended reducing stress, sleeping more, practicing mindfulness. The more you worry about forgetting, the doctor said, the more you'll forget. Anxiety interferes with memory formation. Let go of the fear, and your memory will likely improve. Haruki thanked the doctor and left feeling both relieved and humbled. His mind wasn't deteriorating catastrophically, but even if it had been, he had learned something essential. His worth didn't depend on his intelligence. His value as a human being wasn't determined by his cognitive performance. He could let go of the identity he'd clung to, and he would still be himself, perhaps even more truly himself. He sought out Mrs. Tanaka again, finding her at her grandson's apartment. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "You taught me something my 40 years of studying philosophy never taught me." "What's that?" she asked, smiling. "That wisdom is not the same as knowledge. That being present is more important than being clever. That letting go of who you think you should be is the path to discovering who you actually are." Mrs. Tanaka nodded. "And what have you discovered?" Haruki thought for a moment. "I've discovered that I'm just a human being. Not a brilliant mind, not an accomplished scholar, not an identity to maintain. Just a person who drinks tea and walks in parks and loves his wife and sometimes remembers things and sometimes forgets. And that's enough. That's more than enough." "Yes," Mrs. Tanaka said, "that's wisdom. Not knowing everything, but being okay with not knowing. Not having all the answers, but being comfortable with questions. Not needing to be anyone special, but being fully who you are. This is what the Buddha meant by letting go of the self." Years later, when Haruki retired from teaching, he gave a final lecture that was unlike any he had given before. Instead of demonstrating his knowledge, he spoke about uncertainty. Instead of providing answers, he shared questions. And he ended by saying, "The most important thing I've learned in 40 years of studying philosophy is that studying philosophy is not the same as living wisely. Knowledge is not wisdom. Understanding concepts is not the same as understanding life. And sometimes the wisest thing we can do is let go of our need to be wise and simply be present with the mystery of existence." His students gave him a standing ovation, not because he had impressed them with his intelligence, but because he had given them permission to be uncertain, to not know, to let go of their own performance of competence, and simply be human beings learning together. And Haruki, walking out of the lecture hall for the last time, felt lighter than he had in decades. He had let go of the identity that had defined him, and he had discovered that what remained was not less than before. It was more real, more alive, more connected to the actual experience of being human. This story illuminates another crucial dimension of letting go, the release of fixed ideas about who we are. The Buddha taught about anatta, often translated as non-self or no self. This is one of his most profound and challenging teachings, and it's often misunderstood. Anatta doesn't mean that you don't exist. It means that what you call I, or me, or myself, is not a fixed, permanent, unchanging entity. It's a constantly changing flow of experiences, sensations, thoughts, and patterns. We construct an identity from this flow. I am a smart person. I am a successful professional. I am someone who has it all together. And then we cling to this constructed identity as if it were our essence. But this identity is just a story we tell. It's useful, in a way. It helps us navigate the world, but it's not ultimately real. And when we cling to it desperately, when we make our sense of worth dependent on maintaining it, we suffer. Because like everything else, this identity is subject to change. Life has a way of dismantling our carefully constructed sense of self. Haruki's identity as an intelligent person had served him well for most of his life. It had motivated him to study, to achieve, to contribute valuable knowledge to the world. But it had also become a prison. He couldn't allow himself to forget things, to not know answers, to be ordinary. He had to constantly perform his intelligence to prove that he still existed as the person he believed himself to be. When Mrs. Tanaka asked him, "What are you exactly?" she was pointing him toward the heart of the Buddhist teaching. Who are you really, underneath all the constructed identities? Who are you when you stop performing? Who are you when the labels fall away? This is not an abstract philosophical question. It's an invitation to direct investigation. Right now, as you hear these words, who is listening? Not your name, not your profession, not your achievements or failures. What is? The awareness that is present before any identity is constructed? Most of us never investigate this question because we're too busy maintaining our identities. We're like Haruki, constantly performing, constantly proving, constantly defending the story of who we think we are. And this performance is exhausting. It never ends. Because the identity is always threatened by reality, always in need of reinforcement, always vulnerable to the inevitable changes that life brings. But when we let go of the need to be anyone in particular, when we release our grip on these constructed identities, something remarkable happens. We discover that we still exist. But we exist as something more fluid, more spacious, more free than the rigid identity we were clinging to. Haruki discovered he didn't need to be the intelligent one to have value. He didn't need to know everything to be worthy of respect. He could admit uncertainty, embrace not knowing, be present with direct experience rather than always analyzing it. And in this letting go, he became more real, more authentic, more genuinely himself than he had been in all his years of performing intelligence. This is one of the paradoxes of the spiritual path. We have to let go of who we think we are in order to discover who we actually are. We have to release the constructed self to find the authentic being underneath. We have to stop performing to become real. In your own life, what identities are you clinging to? Who do you think you need to be? What stories about yourself are you desperately maintaining? Are you the strong one who can't show vulnerability? Are you the successful one who can't afford to fail? Are you the person who has it all together, who can't admit to struggling? These identities might have served you once. They might have helped you survive difficult circumstances or achieve important goals. But ask yourself, are they serving you now? Or have they become prisons? Are you living authentically? Or are you performing a role? The practice of letting go invites you to gently question these fixed ideas about who you are. not to destroy your sense of self, but to discover a more fluid, more authentic way of being, to find out who you are when you're not trying to be anyone, to rest in the awareness that exists before any identity is constructed. This doesn't mean you become nobody. It means you become more fully yourself, not the small, defended, rigid self that's always trying to maintain its image, but the larger, more spacious, more authentic being that can flow with change, embrace uncertainty, and meet life as it actually is. Mrs. Tanaka embodied this. She didn't need to be seen as wise or special. She could sit at a dinner party full of academics showing off their knowledge and simply drink her tea. She could be present with what was actually happening. The taste of the tea, the warmth in her hands, the people around her, without needing to perform or prove anything. This is what it looks like to let go of identity. Simple, direct, authentic presence. Tonight, as you settle towards sleep, practice letting go of who you think you need to be. Release your identities, your roles, your performances. You don't have to be smart or successful or competent or together. You don't have to maintain any image or live up to any expectation. You can simply be awareness, simply be presence, simply be this breath flowing in and out. What a relief it is to stop performing, to stop defending, to stop maintaining a constructed self that was always fragile, always vulnerable, always exhausting to uphold. What freedom there is in simply being what you are before any story about yourself arises. Let it go. Let the identities fall away like costumes you've been wearing, and discover what remains, the simple, undeniable fact of being aware, being alive, being present. This awareness doesn't need to be anyone special. It doesn't need to achieve anything or prove anything. It simply is. And it's enough. More than enough. It's everything. Breathe into this. Feel the relief of not needing to be anyone. Feel the freedom of letting go of all the constructed identities that have burdened you. Feel the spaciousness of simply being, without any story about who that being is supposed to be. Rest here. Rest in this letting go. Rest in the authentic presence that emerges when performance ends and reality begins. Let us pause once more. Feel the gentle rhythm of your own breath. Notice how breathing happens by itself, without any effort from you, without any identity required. You don't have to be anyone to breathe. You don't have to maintain any image or live up to any expectation. Breathing simply happens. Life simply flows through you. Allow your body to soften completely now. Release any remaining tension in your face, your neck, your shoulders, your arms, your hands, your chest, your belly, your legs, your feet. Let it all go. Let yourself sink into the surface beneath. You, supported by gravity, held by the earth. You are here. You are present. You are breathing. And none of this requires you to be anyone in particular. You can just be. Just rest. Just allow life to flow through you without resistance, without effort, without the exhausting work of maintaining a constructed identity. This is enough. You are enough. Right now, exactly as you are complete and whole and worthy of rest. Breathe gently. Let go gently. Rest gently in the peace that is always here. When you stop trying to be someone and simply allow yourself to be. We continue our journey now with a teaching about letting go of control. One of the most difficult and most liberating practices in the Buddhist path. In a mountainous region where terraced rice fields climb the hillsides like green staircases and mist gathered in the valleys each morning, there lived a farmer named Ichiro, who had worked the same land his family had tended for 7 generations. His fields produced some of the finest rice in the province, and he was known throughout the region for his meticulous care, his tireless dedication, his unwillingness to accept anything less than perfection. Ichiro rose before dawn every day, regardless of season or weather. He walked his fields checking every plant, examining every terrace, adjusting the water levels with precision, pulling any weed that dared to appear. He knew each section of land intimately, which areas needed more water, which needed better drainage, which were most vulnerable to pests or disease. But his dedication had become something else over the years. It had become a kind of anxious micromanagement, a compulsive need to control every variable, a belief that the success of his crops depended entirely on his constant vigilance and intervention. He couldn't rest, couldn't delegate, couldn't trust that anything would be okay if he wasn't actively managing it. His wife, Yuki, worried about him. "Ichiro," she would say, "you're working yourself to exhaustion. The rice will grow. It's been growing here for generations. You don't have to control every single detail." But Ichiro couldn't accept this. In his mind, any relaxation of control would lead to disaster. If he didn't check the fields twice daily, something would go wrong. If he didn't personally supervise every aspect of cultivation, the harvest would fail. If he didn't maintain absolute vigilance, his family would suffer. This need for control extended beyond the fields. He tried to control his children's choices, insisting they follow his advice about education, careers, relationships. He tried to control his wife's activities, offering constant suggestions about how she could do things better. He tried to control even the weather, checking forecasts obsessively, planning and replanting based on predictions that often proved wrong. The anxiety of maintaining this level of control was crushing. Ichiro barely slept. His body was perpetually tense. His mind never stopped racing through all the things that could go wrong, all the variables he needed to manage, all the potential disasters he needed to prevent. He had stomach problems from stress. His blood pressure was dangerously high. At 52, he looked 70. One spring, during the critical planting season, Ichiro's attempt at total control reached a breaking point. He had planned everything perfectly. The exact day to plant each section, the precise amount of water for each terrace, the optimal spacing for each seedling. He had checked and rechecked his calculations. Everything was in order. But on the morning he had scheduled to begin planting, he woke with intense pain in his chest. His wife, frightened by his pallor and his difficulty breathing, insisted they go immediately to the hospital in the nearest town. Ichiro protested. The planting couldn't wait, but Yuki was adamant. At the hospital, after running tests, the doctor delivered a serious warning. Ichiro was on the verge of a heart attack. His stress levels were dangerously high. His body was in a state of chronic emergency. If he didn't make major changes, he would likely die within the year. "You need to rest," the doctor said firmly. "Complete rest. No work for at least 2 months. Your heart cannot sustain this level of stress any longer." Ichiro listened with growing horror. 2 months? But this was planting season. The rice needed to be planted now, within the next 2 weeks, or the entire year's crop would be lost. His family depended on this harvest. The village depended on this harvest. He couldn't rest. He couldn't let go of control. Too much was at stake. But the doctor was unyielding. If you don't rest, you'll die. It's that simple. No amount of rice is worth your life. Yuki took charge in a way she rarely did. She brought Ichiro home, put him to bed, and called their eldest son Kenji, who had moved to the city to become a teacher, but who knew the land from his childhood. "Your father is sick," she told him. "He cannot work. Can you come home and help with the planting?" Kenji came immediately, bringing his younger brother Hiro. Together, they assured their father that they would handle the planting. They knew what to do. They had learned from him. The rice would be fine. But Ichiro couldn't let go. From his bed, he tried to give detailed instructions. The south field needs to be planted first. Use the seedlings from the greenhouse, not the ones from the nursery. Make sure the water level is exactly 3 inches. Not 2, not 4, exactly 3. And watch the weather. If it looks like rain, wait. If it's too dry, irrigate first. And the spacing must be precisely. "Father," Kenji interrupted gently but firmly, "we know. We'll take care of it. You need to rest." For the first week, Ichiro lay in bed tortured by his inability to control what was happening in his fields. Every sound from outside, his sons talking, tools clanking, water flowing, made him strain to hear what they were doing, to assess whether they were doing it right. He imagined 1,000 disasters, seedlings planted at the wrong depth, water levels too high or too low, pests going unnoticed, the whole crop failing because he wasn't there to manage every detail. Yuki, seeing his agitation, spoke to him one evening as she brought him dinner. "Ichiro," she said, "I know this is hard for you, but I want you to consider something. For 7 generations, rice has grown in these fields. Through drought and flood, through war and peace, through good farmers and bad farmers, the rice knows how to grow. The land knows how to nourish. Maybe your role is not to control everything, but to work in partnership with forces larger than yourself." "But what if they're doing it wrong?" Ichiro asked, his voice tight with anxiety. "Then we'll learn from it," Yuki said. "But what if they're doing it right? What if the rice grows even without your constant supervision? What if you've been carrying a burden that isn't yours to carry?" Ichiro couldn't sleep that night, her words echoing in his mind. Could it be true? Could the rice grow without his micromanagement? Could his son succeed without his constant direction? Could life unfold okay, even when he wasn't controlling every variable? The questions terrified him because they challenged his deepest belief that he was responsible for making everything work, that only his vigilance prevented disaster, that letting go of control would lead to catastrophe. Unable to rest, Ichiro got out of bed in the pre-dawn darkness and walked slowly to his fields, his chest still aching, his breath short. What he saw there stopped him completely. His sons had planted the entire south field. The rows were straight. The spacing looked correct. The young rice plants stood green and healthy in the water. And standing among the plants, checking their progress with the same careful attention Ichiro himself would have used, was Kenji, moving through the rows with practiced competence. Ichiro stood at the edge of the field watching his son work, and slowly, tears began to flow. Not tears of grief, but tears of recognition. His son knew what he was doing. He had learned well. He was capable. The rice was growing, and none of this had required Ichiro's control. As the sun rose, painting the terraced fields in shades of gold, Kenji noticed his father standing there. He waded out of the field and came to him, concerned. "Father, you should be resting," the doctor said. "I know," Ichiro said, his voice breaking. "I know what the doctor said, but I needed to see. I needed to know if everything would be okay without me." "And?" Kenji asked gently. "It will be more than okay," Ichiro admitted. "You're doing excellent work, better than I could have done, because you're not consumed by anxiety about every detail. You're working with confidence, with calm attention, with trust in the process. I've been trying so hard to control everything that I forgot what you just showed me. The rice grows whether I'm anxious about it or not. My job is to provide good conditions, and then trust the natural process." They stood together looking at the field, at the young plants catching the morning light. "Father," Kenji said, "I learned everything from you. Your dedication, your care, your attention to detail, these are gifts you gave me, but I also learned what not to do. I watched you sacrifice your health, your peace, your relationships, all to try to control things that can't be fully controlled. I learned that working hard is valuable, but working anxiously is destructive." Ichiro nodded slowly, feeling the truth of this in his aching chest, in his exhausted body, in the recognition that his attempt at total control had nearly killed him. Over the following weeks, as he recovered in bed while his sons completed the planting, Ichiro had nothing to do but observe. And what he observed challenged every assumption he had held about control. The weather didn't follow the forecasts. It rained when it wasn't supposed to, and was dry when rain was predicted. But the rice adapted. When there was too much rain, the plants simply absorbed what they needed and let the rest drain away. When it was dry, they drew more deeply on the soil's moisture. They were resilient in ways Ichiro's anxious interventions had never needed to account for. His sons made different choices than he would have made. They planted one section earlier than Ichiro would have. They used a different fertilizer mixture in another area. They adjusted water levels based on their own judgment rather than Ichiro's precise specifications, and the rice grew beautifully. Not in spite of these differences, but simply growing according to its nature, responding to the conditions provided, demonstrating an intelligence and resilience that had nothing to do with human micromanagement. One afternoon, a Buddhist monk from the village temple came to visit Ichiro. The monk, named Takuan, was known for his wisdom and his calm presence. He sat beside Ichiro's bed and asked, "How are you feeling?" "Physically better," Ichiro said, "but mentally confused. I've spent my whole life believing that everything depended on my control, that if I let go, disaster would follow. But I've been forced to let go, and disaster hasn't come. The rice is growing. My sons are capable. Life continues without my constant management. I don't know what to think." Takuan smiled. "You've discovered what the Buddha taught. That much of our suffering comes from trying to control what cannot be controlled. We can influence outcomes through our actions, our care, our attention. But we cannot control outcomes. There are too many variables, too many forces beyond our grasp. When we try to control everything, we only create suffering for ourselves." "But surely," Ichiro said, "some control is necessary. Surely we can't just be passive and hope for the best?" "Of course," Takuan agreed. "The Buddha taught the middle way, neither anxious control nor passive resignation. We do what we can with wisdom and skill. We provide good conditions. We act when action is needed. But then, We let go of our attachment to specific outcomes. We trust in the larger process while doing our part skillfully. He paused. Think of a river. The river does its work, carving stone, nourishing life, flowing to the sea, without anxiety, without trying to control every detail. It simply follows its nature. When it meets an obstacle, it doesn't stop in frustration. It flows around, over, through. It adapts without suffering. Takuan gestured toward the window, toward the rice fields visible beyond. Your rice is like that river. It knows how to grow. Your sons are like that river. They know how to farm. Your role is not to micromanage every detail, but to provide support and then trust the natural intelligence that flows through all things. How do I trust? Ichiro asked. How do I let go of the belief that everything depends on my control? You start, Takuan said, by noticing what's actually happening. Right now, you are not in your fields. You are not managing every detail. And yet, the rice grows, the sun rises, the seasons progress, life unfolds. The world continues without your anxious control. This is not theory. This is your direct experience right now. He leaned forward. The practice of letting go of control is not a one-time event. It's a continuous returning to what's actually happening, rather than to your fears about what might happen. It's catching yourself in the act of trying to control and gently releasing again and again and again. Over the following months, as Ichiro slowly returned to work in the fields, he practiced this teaching. When he noticed himself starting to micromanage his sons, he would pause, breathe, and let go. When he caught himself obsessing over weather forecasts, he would return to the present moment, to what was actually happening right now. When anxiety about potential disasters arose, he would acknowledge the feeling and then release it, trusting that he could meet actual problems when they actually arose, without suffering in advance over imagined ones. It wasn't easy. Decades of habitual control don't dissolve quickly, but gradually, something shifted. He began to experience moments of working in the fields without anxiety, of observing his son's choices without needing to correct them, of noticing changing weather without panic, of trusting that he could do his best and then let go of the outcome. And remarkably, the harvest that year was excellent. Not because Ichiro had controlled every detail, he hadn't, but because good seeds had been planted in good soil with adequate water and care. Because rice knows how to grow. Because his sons were capable. Because natural processes have their own intelligence that doesn't require human anxiety to function. But more importantly than the harvest, Ichiro's health improved dramatically. His blood pressure decreased. His stomach problems resolved. He began to sleep through the night. His face, which had been perpetually tight with stress, began to relax. He looked younger, moved easier, laughed more. Yuki noticed the change most clearly. "You're different," she said one evening as they sat together watching the sunset over the fields. Softer, more present, more alive. "I'm learning to let go," Ichiro said. "Learning that I don't have to control everything, that I can do my best and then trust the process, that trying to manage every variable was killing me, and it wasn't even necessary. The rice grows, life unfolds, and my anxious control doesn't make it better, it just makes me suffer." He paused. "I still care about the fields. I still work hard, but I'm learning to work from a different place, not from fear and desperate control, but from care and trust. It's like the monk said, the middle way between anxious control and passive resignation, doing what I can and then letting go. Years later, when Ichiro eventually passed the farm fully to his sons and retired, he would spend his days sitting by the fields, watching the rice grow through its cycles, and people would comment on how peaceful he seemed, how different from the anxious, controlling man he had been. When asked about the change, he would smile and say, "I learned that life is wiser than me, that trying to control everything is a kind of arrogance and a kind of suffering. I learned to do my part and then let go, to work with life rather than against it, to trust the process rather than trying to force outcomes, and in that letting go, I found more peace than all my years of control ever gave me."